Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's BA Insight session, where I'm really pleased to have two guests with us, excellent guests who I've worked with before, to talk to us about the topic of UX and UI in business analysis. And before we get into that exciting topic, let's start with some introductions, starting with Josh, please.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, John, for having us on the on your podcast. I've seen great things. Yeah, I've worked with John a few years ago at HPC. I have since then moved and worked close with different teams. I am a senior product designer. I currently work at OVO. I've done lots of things in between. I've worked for News Corp, worked for Arcadia. I worked for lots of different companies. I started my own thing for a little bit. And yeah, all things user experience. And that's me, really. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Josh. And Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Leyton. I am a senior product designer. I've been designing for before the web was even around. That's a bit of a lie, but yeah, sort of last 20 years. I've worked at companies and led design teams from companies such as Cov Wales, where I was art director at 26, which was an eye-opening job. Electronic Arts, HSBC, where I met John. I currently am a senior product designer at Shell at the minute, and that role definitely encompasses UX and UI, a bit of BA as well. So yeah, looking forward to today's discussion.
Perfect. So definitely two of the right people for sure to talk about UX and UI in relation to BA. But let's start with Josh on the first question then. In terms of your experience, Josh, how does UX and UI as well as business analysis combine together for transformation?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting topic, really, and it's something that we talk about a lot when we start a project, whether that's like a new initiative, whether it's like transforming the business, whether it's a new migration piece or anything. Yeah, I think it's a both teams, so like both disciplines have kind of worked together a lot, and I've worked differently with different BAs depending on how they like to work and so on. But I think what's imperative is that the two together can really help deliver something that works really well for the end user, the clients, and the business really. I think my experience has been very good with BAs, and I think when it's worked at its best is when the whole process has been done together. So BAs will go out and do their bits of discovery separately to the discovery we will do as designers, but coming back and really making sure that everything like links up together and works well together. And I think the key bit for me and the dream when working with BAs is that it's all about detail. So when you're really in the detail, which you are as a designer, and especially when you come to hand over to developers or work with the business, you almost have like a guidebook of what all the answers are to all the questions that they either think of or that they will think of in the future. And I just think that that collaboration is timely, it is very timely, but it means that you catch a lot of the potential issues that could happen in the future and make sure that, whether it's money going out to customers or payments being incorrect or whether it's data being incorrect somewhere, you make sure that all of that's captured and also it's translated to the kind of the best user experience that you can as a designer. But yeah, I've had great experience working with BAs.
Thanks, Josh. Amanda?
Yeah, I think the proof's in the pudding. I think when you work on a project and you don't have a BA, you miss what they bring to the table. A lot of the time you have the answers. They have the answers before you need them. They've already got the business requirements, which is half the battle. Getting key stakeholder accountability. The BAs can go and chase them while you're busy doing the design work, is a massive help. Working closely to gather those requirements at the beginning before the design process kicks off. There's nothing more annoying than having a key stakeholder who already knows what the design is. Look at my picture. And you go, well, what is it supposed to do? And then they haven't got a clue. They've just drawn a nice wireframe. So I think having a good BA on your side and getting those questions at the beginning. It makes the life for the UX UI designer a lot easier, but also the project runs smoother because you're not constantly chasing questions. Certainly in my current role, I've had to play a BA. There just was no budget for one. And I had to go off and find technical documentation and all sorts. And it was a nightmare. But I knew what questions I had to find. And I definitely don't envy that role because it was hard. But I think you just have to work closely with them to make sure that the business understands what's going on, and then the designer knows what the business needs.
Yeah, and some excellent points both made there, and definitely ones I can relate to. I mean, I think that work that a BA does to naturally go and understand who the stakeholders are that they would need to speak to, but probably you'll need to speak to as well, knowing the processes that are pertinent, knowing the issues that they're having, sometimes having already had a think about, how those visual elements of the solution, how they fit in with other things that are already in place or about to be built elsewhere. I think that can sort of help the set the scene, and it can help prep designers that come in so they have that view of the landscape. But it's also really been positive to me to see what the developers and see what the designers bring, because seeing that different mentality that you bring has been a really good way to learn as well as a BA, I would say. But I'm glad you both mentioned that sort of like close collaboration anyway, which is essential. And it's important to note that, because I think that very much in a similar way that developers will work closely with BAs, the designers will work closely with the BAs as well, and you become that sort of like partners within the same team. And therefore, perhaps there's times when you can decide amongst yourself as to, is it right for you both to attend a meeting with a stakeholder, or for example, can I go and have an initial session, get a feel for what they might want, and then play it into Amanda and Josh as an example. Yeah. So I think that collaboration point is key. I wonder, more broadly, actually, how as designers that you collaborate with BAs to ensure that the needs of the business are accurately captured and reflected in any solution. So I guess it's recognising that collaboration is key. The question really is, how do you ensure that collaboration works as well as it can? So a question to you first, please, Amanda.
I think it comes down to that requirement gathering process. I think if we understand the need and what the project's about first, I always find with the BA kind of represents what the business wanted to do. And the designer, or like a good designer, will always think of what the user wants to do. So you have this real balance between possibly the UX designer thinking more about the user, but the business thinking more about, well, actually, no, we need to sell more. So although that's a better design, there's sort of black arts involved where you can say, well, technically we should do this, but because we need to sell more, we're going to do this. And I think the BA is always there to sort of play good cop, bad cop sort of thing, to try and keep it an even keel. So it's not always user-led, although we would like to think so. In a commercial world, we can't do user-led. We have to be led by sales and revenue and those ROI targets that always kill off any last credibility of inspiration. But certainly I think it's always that soundboard, and you always go back to the BA and go, are you absolutely sure the business needs this? And the good BA always goes off and goes, yes. I find that's always the best sort of way to work.
In that sense, Amanda, as well, it's another ally, isn't it? Rather than just the designer going to the stakeholder or set of stakeholders saying, I really like your picture, but actually, have you thought about more to the design? So you can think about the design, how it applies to the business situation, rather than just to the whims of the person that was there before, I guess.
It's a soundboard back and forth, definitely. So the designer can bounce off the BA and sort of say, oh, well, do you think this is what they mean? Or do you think this covers enough of what the business is actually trying to achieve without compromising the user experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, what would be your perspective on that, please?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think before like job roles, the important thing I always think is like the individual as a person. And I think when you collaborate with people, first understanding how they are, how they like to receive information, how they like to collaborate, how they like to, do check-ins and the whole process. And then I don't think it needs to be, in terms of collaboration, there needs to be no kind of like, best for me, how I found is when there's not like a rigid structure there, and it's very much like, you're almost partners in a way, and you both sing off each other's hymn sheet. And I think by doing that, it really helps make sure that you're one thinking not just as a designer from like this is going to look aesthetically nice and it's going to work for the user specifically nice how I think or we think or the user research tells us. But also it balances all the kind of thoughts of the BA as well, and the business and other people as well, I think are really important to bring in on that journey. And I think someone said something interesting to me the other day about designers, and it's not, as a designer, it's not a whole, it's actually my line manager, it's not just about us as designers driving design forward, it's about the entirety of the team being on the same page and doing design. It's the same with BA work as well, I believe. Like if everyone can, chip in with things, it means that it's not, yes, people have their specific roles, but if everyone can chip in, understand each other's roles and help each other, it means that things don't get missed. And because at the end of the day, we're serving the same kind of customer or end client or whoever it is. And I think making sure those requirements get resolved, I guess, and like we've delivered something for the business. I think it's also from a design point of view, and it's just a person point of view. I think it's really important to have as many different disciplines in the room as possible at any stage, because an idea can come from anywhere, and even a requirement can be questioned, even if it sounds like the soundest requirement in the world that's going to bring tons and tons of money. I still feel like it should be questioned and understood, and as someone else in the room got a different perspective on it, which might actually end up making more money in the long run, or bring a better brand image to the company, or deliver for this set of customers that we don't think about, but they are still growing. And even though it's a small number, it gives our presence much more to look at. And I think that collaboration and the challenge in between BA, UX, product design, development, whoever it is, I think that's really key to making sure that no, not everyone stays in their own box, if you like, but everyone has their own role, their own responsibility, but everyone has that like input on each other's role that can help push everyone and sympathize with what other people are thinking and all. But yeah, I think that's just working collaboratively, like cross-functionally, and having a shared opinion of different disciplines, I think really helps with that, and essentially gets to the greatest outcome. The best meetings I've been in is when the stakeholders are kind of like the business, and this is dependent on them as well, the characters that you have, but it's really nice when stakeholders are like, right, these are the ideas, these are the requirements, we need to do this because of X amount of money that we want to bring to the business, but I just want to open the floor and see what anyone else thinks. It creates an environment that allows everyone to kind of succeed. It gets ideas all the way through the business, like it gets ideas from like from people that have just started work, or all the way to the top, and it encourages more ideas. I think that's really important.
And it is important, as you say. I mean, on top of being a sounding board, which is really useful, and collaborating and getting insight from the BAs, that challenging is actually really important as well. So it's like it's important for the BAs to try and put themselves in the shoes of the end user and the business stakeholders, and try and ask you on their behalf the difficult questions to make you think about, is this design really, really helpful? Or and I think the flip side is, as I've definitely found, is that we can sometimes go into a design session only really with like bias to a degree based on what we've seen in place before in terms of solutions, and quite often the person doing the UX and the UI, they'll bring a completely different perspective, and therefore the design can be quite different than what you were expecting. So it's useful to be that person that the designer can pitch their idea to and explain why they've designed it in a way that you might not necessarily expect, but how it hits the brief, where it hits the brief, and where the flaws are perhaps in the existing solutions, and therefore why it's done differently. And I find that particularly interesting because that then influences, my ability to have different perspectives. So when I go into another session in another project in the future, I can bring another view on what the UI could look like as an idea as well. Yeah. And I think beyond that, I think other things that I think BAs can help with generally is just pulling those design sessions together. I think we've already mentioned recognising the stakeholders. So I think once the stakeholders are known, we can organise some of the sessions on behalf of the designers as well to make sure they've got everyone they need in the room and perhaps take away some of that burden from them. But I think between the three of us, I feel like we've covered probably a fair few points anyway on that one. So thank you. So I guess then we spoke about the need for collaboration, and a few other things besides. We spoke about how to collaborate. I wonder, are there any techniques, tools, or approaches, Josh, that you tend to use when working with BAs and stakeholders when it comes to that UX UI focus?
Yeah, I think communication is key, and I think myself as a designer, and it's quite typical with a lot of designers. I'm quite scatty, and I have files all over the place. I have documentation naturally that just sits everywhere, and messages that are just, I kind of have a list in my head and I just start churning through stuff. And I think where, like, it's again a communication thing, where collaboration comes in really well is when you have, sensible, proactive people. And I find that is, and very well documented individuals, which you find quite a lot with BAs, which are really, really helpful. And what I found a lot is kind of like, right, I've got this kind of, I want to get through, sending through prototypes. I also want to do a discovery mapping session with the stakeholders. I also want to talk to this individual and then start a channel with these groups of people to share ideas and stuff. I think what really helps with that is collaborating with product and BAs, because a lot of the time they really help you like structure that and say, well, we've got all these slots that are currently in the diary with the stakeholders. Maybe you take this slot. Maybe we then send out a follow-up message on this day. We can include that in our handover, all that sort of stuff, which really helps. But the kind of the tools and the process I usually follow, if there is more, like if it is a bit more rigid sometimes, is usually like joining the stakeholder sessions, where like a requirement list will get a brief requirement will be given to us. Myself and usually BA product will sit in a room with the stakeholders and really go into detail on what that is and like list down stuff and ask questions and so on. The BA will be, documenting all this stuff, lots and lots of requirements and so on. They will then continue to go through that process and, really go into detail on it, but keep sharing back and forward and so on usually like Slack or Teams or, some kind of messaging service. We'll then also have like a centralized place for a lot of this stuff. So it'll be, Confluence or, Notion or whatever it is, where you can really share, this is the project, this is all the stuff that we've got within it. I can then upload designs there. There's then the Jira part of it. So a bunch of tickets will be created, which usually the BA has created for me. And it'll be like, right, these are the sections we need designs for. And this is all the links that you need. So you start the discovery phase, which again, working hand in hand. We'll then share different stages with the stakeholders in the sessions that are available. So we'll jump into sessions, run them through designs, let them click around themselves if there's a prototype. And then off the back of that, if we get user research, which sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, we'll then run sessions checking the design. So at that point, we kind of know we've got all the requirements signed off. It's then more of a case of, right, these are the requirements, this is what we think. Let's start testing these solutions and seeing and validating whether they actually will work for the users. Sometimes we'll do that very lightweight. Sometimes we'll do that like a lot more detailed, depending on like the reach that it's going out to. And then, yeah, we'll just continue to communicate like updates, usually via the BAs and products, like because it's just succinct then and it comes across much better than me writing out a bullet point list. It's very much like this is the update from this project, this is all the BA updates, this is the design updates with links to files and etc. etc. And then users can very much come into Figma, which we use all, like for all our designs, and they can leave comments, they can vote on things, they can yeah, just really collaborate in there, which is really important. One thing I also do a lot of is break down a lot of the user stories and drop them into like Figma just above the design, so you're kind of constantly aware of like this is what we have to deliver for this, and then any questions or ideas you can just tag to that, and the BA can have a look at, and then get back to you and go, oh, actually, maybe we should challenge this because of whatever reason, or we've got to do that, Josh, because of this reason, and so on. And yeah, that's my process really.
I mean, what you described there, particularly at the end, Josh, that shows that that if the BA has left any holes in their analysis or doesn't yet know certain things, then as you're trying to piece together some visuals that will help the end user navigate through a system or a series of platforms, whatever it might be, that there'll probably be some odd gap in what you're trying to do, because you have a design for something and then there'll be the bridge that normally takes them from one place to another will be missing. So the design will not link up, which will reinforce the fact that there's more analysis to be done, whether or not the BA knew that at first or not. So quite interesting that tie-in and that natural traceability, if you like, you get with working with the designers.
I think that's it, and I think a lot of the time, like there's obviously like people have their own roles, but I think they all naturally cross over slightly, and I think that's really important. And I think it's also useful to see like designers documents some of the requirements, even if it's a duplicate, just put it in the document so that there's that cross reference as well and links out to the right places, so that whoever is in the journey, whether it's an engineer building it or whether it's a stakeholder, they can see where they are within the journey, which is useful.
Absolutely. Amanda, it'd be good to get your perspective on that question around techniques, tooling, and approach.
Well, I think it's not so much a technique because, as Josh says, depends on who you're working with and the size of your team. I can only relate it to the current project I'm on, where we didn't have a BA. We didn't have a BA for the first 6 months. So there was definitely gaps missing in the analysis, obviously, because I was trying to find my own research, trying to answer my own questions. And then we were going, and to the point where I was actually writing and there was just gaps because you're only doing it, you're thinking of it from the user perspective only, and then there'll be some element from the business that'll be completely forgot because the business isn't being advocated. I'm a UX designer, I'm thinking about the user, and not having the BA in the team to sort of fight the corner of the business, even though you know what the app has to do. There are absolutely gaps missed, and it's not even from a business perspective, like from a ROI or trying to hit certain targets. It could just be something as simple. Well, we have to show that because they're one of our biggest partners. And you go, are they? But no one's done the analysis to tell the designer, so we have no idea. So it definitely falls apart and makes it a lot harder when the designer has to do everything. And currently, businesses do seem to be coming around to, well, the BA could do a little bit of design work and the designers could do a little bit of BA work, and that we can, but it's not great because you either have that sort of user mindset and you go through it and you need the requirements to double check why you're doing something, and why it's useful for the business, and then you bounce it back as to, but then is it useful for the user? And without that BA having the business side to that conversation, it becomes very difficult to have that conversation by yourself. And that's why it doesn't really work, these hybrid roles. Because there's a reason I'm a designer and not a BA. And I think to Josh's point, a little bit more scatty, you'll get inspiration from somewhere and you'll go off down that rabbit hole, and then you'll forget a major partner or something like that. So I think it's not so much how you work in collaboration. I think it's more important to highlight the benefits to the whole process, really. I think it's such a strong partnership, and I think it's one of those things when you don't have one, you really miss them, like I have in my project.
Yeah, I would agree. And by the flip side, it's like I've been on projects where as a BA, you'll do prototypes and mock-ups of what you think the screens could look like or what the reports could look like. But because they're so sort of influenced by what we've already seen or what's already there, because we're not naturally, a BA is generally looking at working on their techniques, working on their interaction skills. They're not looking for different ways to design, and I think as you said, Amanda, when you are a designer, that's your role, and you'll have more of a focus on sort of enhancing your design ideas, I suppose, rather than figuring out your BA techniques.
Yeah.
So the flip
I
side
don't
is
have
obviously
any,
true for a BA as well.
yeah. Just the truth, I absolutely have none.
That's it. But it's good though the way that both sides can cross pollinate to a degree, because I mean certainly from working with both of you two in the past, there's definitely things we go, oh yeah, that's a different perspective to take on it. Maybe I can think a little bit differently how to use this, and even recognizing that if all you do on some occasions is just make sure that you bring the designers with you to the sessions and you introduce them to the right stakeholders, but you stay in the room and you're able to sit there and sort of like almost facilitate where needed if the scope starts to drift, or if we're not focusing on the right requirements or the right systems, that can sometimes be useful. And
I think that, yeah, sorry, John, to jump in, just to Josh's point as well, and to that point, I think the ability to keep track of projects as well, because that holistic overview of actually where we're on, where we need to go, designers can get lost because we'll be going down a road, a certain user path, end-to-end journey, but that end-to-end journey could be one of 20 that has to do when performing on the app or the desktop sort of experience. So it's really that overall just okay, but you remember you still got to do this, and this. You go, oh yeah, of course I do, and then off. And I think it's always quite nice to be reminded.
That's it. And I remember from working with both of you as well, whenever there's a designer on the patch, every stakeholder, especially the senior ones, will want a little piece of you to work on, like the latest deck, the latest, anything of showmanship, that they can help. So it's definitely worth the BA remembering that the designer isn't just working on the one thing that the BA is working on. So therefore, make sure that you try and anchor some conversations in a little bit of context and give the designer enough so that they can navigate the many things that they're probably being asked to do at any given point. I wonder then, I mean, I guess the next question in terms of whether there are occasions, we'll start with yourself on this, Amanda, where you've seen instances where the business requirements are one thing, but they potentially conflict with what might be like good user experience or good user interface. Is that something you've ever seen? And if so, how could you
Always.
do you overcome
all the time? All the time. It's yeah, like I sort of mentioned the black arts before. There's definitely tips and tricks, especially early days of e-commerce design, where they would I remember one company, I won't name any, purposely making a sign-up process about 8 pages longer than it needed to be because they were getting paid for banner advertisement. So they were like, well, you're locked into a process and we need them to stay on as long as possible. And that's 8 banner ads. I'm like, the form could be 2 pages long. And they're like, no, just spread it out. And you're like, well, that's horrible. But at the end of the day, the process is the same, and it's terrible experience. But from the business's perspective, that sort of paid enough money to make that application. So yeah, lots and lots. It is getting better, and I think people do realize, obviously, with better UX, more focusing on the actual task, less cognitive energy wasted. It's a better experience. People will return, they'll tell their friends. More conversations, more leads. This is a great experience. You do have it. I think that is winning nowadays. It's certainly in the olden days it wasn't really the case, but I think now people have a certain expectation of like not being hoodwinked by businesses like that anymore, because there's just too much competition now. You just can't get away with it. They'll just go somewhere else.
And Josh, what would be your point? I noticed, I don't know if it can't be coincidence. We get 2 designers in, and one of them is making the most use of the icons than I've ever seen them do.
Yeah, I hope I'm the first one to do it. Yeah, I think for me, yeah, it's everything Amanda said. I totally agree with. I think it is getting a little bit. I say it's getting a little bit better. I think it depends where you work and it depends what industry you're in, and a lot of the time. And I think the things that always trip you up is a financial, like the advertisement, whatever you categorize that as, something that's generating another stream of income. So you're trying to do a set journey for a user, yet there's something else in the on the side, which is like, oh, I want to come and say hello because I'm going to make the company loads more money, and that really gets in the way of user experience. Yes, in terms of those users specifically looking for that, great. They might click on it, they might buy it, they might do something, but then they forgot about the journey they were on. And I think it's not always tracked carefully of like what damage that's doing, because you could take someone off here and then you might have lost that customer for life. And I think I think that's part of it. Another part of it is if you do that, make sure it's, I suppose, tasteful and at the right point in the top of the journey when you're not distracting someone from a key part, really. It's also making sure this stuff doesn't, appeals to the majority of your users, I guess, and it's tailored to those users. But then on the other end of the spectrum, it's when you've got things that companies can't get away from, like legalities. It's things that just have to be done because otherwise they could either get fined, they need to set X amount of characters because of a certain message they need to get across, and it's more need than they'd like to. And that sort of stuff is quite hard. Like, it's everyone understands it. The business need to do it. Everyone's kind of singing on the same page, but it's like we just need to show this somewhere, and it actually sometimes can distract you from the user experience. But you just need to find a way to keep it minimal from distraction. And like, this is important, but remember, the most important thing was signing up to this page rather than read through this 2 essays of legal writing, which people still need to read through, but it's just not over clouding people and over stimulating them, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the fact that BA has that view of the overall process, the overall journey end to end, which might not just include customers or end users, but also might include the internal teams as well. That can help them sort of appraise, the impact, I guess, of every part of the journey. And I guess taking that example that Amanda went through, well, if we're taking them through like a series of screens before they're even using the tool, are we at risk of scaring them off from using the tool in the first place? Because maybe that tool is not something they're getting much benefit out of, but maybe we're asking them to fill in a survey, for instance, as part of their journey, and making it painful means they're probably not going to do it.
No, I think also with that, it's like when you've got multiple, because you can have a lot of companies where everyone's very isolated and there's so many different teams trying to sell and trying to make money or trying to push their agenda and so on. But I think it works best when everyone sees it as a collective, and it's like we almost test these things against each other, and we're not different companies trying to get the same spot with the same company trying to do the best for our users. And if that means that my team has to go down the pecking order because it doesn't work so well for our customers, and that's it. And I think sometimes everyone trying to push to the top all the time can really affect the design, because it's like we need spot one, we need spot two, and it's sometimes the person with the loudest voice rather than the team that makes the most money rather than the one that's most effective for the customer. And that's where BAs really come helpful, because they can steer that conversation a bit.
And I think it comes back to the main question that any UX designer asks is why? Why are we doing it? And then the BA can also ask that question back to the business. Well, why do we need to do it like that? So if the designer is asking, why does the user have to be put through that pain? The business analyst can go to the business and say, well, is it worth the pain? Like Josh says, is the revenue made on those banners the same money we would get if we sign up someone faster? So it always comes down to why. I bore my team constantly because I must say why about 20 times a day. But it's the best question, because you have to think, oh, actually, why am I doing it? Instead of being told, but why? Why do I need to do that? I also have a toddler, and they ask the question all the time, so it helps to repeat that sort of stuff.
I don't think it's a bad thing to learn from the toddlers at some point, because there's normally someone in the room who hasn't really thought about why they've asked for something, and asking why will hopefully encourage them to. But it also makes maybe the rest of the room think about their needs as well a little bit more. And it's interesting. I mean, there's been some related topics that I've had in these sessions, like such as the why, what, where, when, who, etc. Is sort of like a good way of encouraging some of the thought processes that you want your stakeholders to consider with UX and UI. But also on a prior session as well, where we covered design thinking with Johan and Carla, that was very much related, and thinking, allowing us to make sure we're thinking with a mindset of the end user in mind, rather than just thinking about our own maybe motivations as the BA or on behalf of the project sponsors. And I think between you, I mean, you've definitely covered loads of good practices in terms of thinking about the why, collaboration, iteration, plenty of involvement, not just taking one lens. But are there any other best practices that you think you might call out in terms of BA or UX UI collaboration? And I'll put that one to Josh first.
Yeah, I think I've been learning a lot about this recently. I think as a designer, the biggest strength that you can have is kind of trying to understand things holistically, which you don't always do because you're passionate, you want to learn about design, and even the greatest, most experienced designers still have that urge to do something that looks great to what their opinion is sometimes. And I think sometimes you've got to take out of the equation and understand what the different disciplines and people are thinking, going through, like what the state of the business is, like, the pressures that the teams are under, all this sort of stuff. And I think that's really super important to make sure that you are delivering quality, and you're not only delivering something that works great and makes money and does all these kind of key things, but that the team then come back to you and go, oh, this worked really well. Let's give design more. Let's give BAs more. This is really impactful. And I think that piece, especially with design and BAs, I think that piece around like value of like what these guys have actually brought to the team is a really key one, because it's still today, like I feel like these are the two kind of disciplines that, if you go to different companies, feels like there's a lot of other job roles that can do these two roles in some degree. And I think when you actually have that time, when you work closely with a BA and as a designer, I think it's just the outcome is always like top notch. It feels like you've done everything that needs to be done. It doesn't feel like it comes back and back again to like issues and stuff. There's always something that needs improving, but it doesn't seem like that. And I think if anything, like it's that after piece of like, talking through and showing the benefits of it and the value, which I think the value and the benefits of these two disciplines could be shouted about more. And I still think that it's like lacking something a little bit in a lot of places. And I can't believe how many places and teams will have no designers and BAs at all, and like they've built this thing from scratch. It serves a massive customer base, and then it's like, wow, we need to get this team in now to fix it, kind of thing. And that happens everywhere, really. And I think it's definitely getting better, but I think it could still be improved, which hopefully this podcast does, John.
Hopefully, I won't put pressure on myself to give any numbers or KPIs against it, but no, I think it can only help. I mean, there's certainly someone that at some point in the past wouldn't have worked with designers. Then I think it's very easy to go, why do we need them? We do mock-ups, we put screen designs together, we take a picture of the current system, we add a few boxes on it. why do we need someone from a UX or UI perspective? And I know, from working with a peer review at different times and other designers as well, there's loads of benefit, and just, having someone with a completely different perspective and lens on things, who's going to challenge, the way that are going to use and interact with a solution, how it could look, is really important. And it's interesting when you bring up value as well, because I think, BAs can focus sometimes on techniques that are not really providing value. They're just there maybe to practice a technique. And I guess with designers, there's possibly an opportunity there for some of them to be practicing new techniques that are not really relevant to that particular scope sometimes. And I think between the pair of them, you can almost be, what value is that technique adding, or what value is that design adding? And so they can definitely help each other.
That's a good point, John. I was talking to a developer the other day, and he's really good at animating, and I didn't know that. I found out the other day, and at the moment we're going through some, things, we're fixing some stuff and whatnot, and I was like, oh, how can we go about like creating like a really nice animation screen for like as we load the tool and do all this kind of cool stuff? And he's like, oh, like I really want to do this, Josh, but like I'd rather spend the next couple of months fixing the issues that we've got. And I think if we're using loads with the issues that we may currently have, and I've heard this a few times, like it's they'll see this fancy animation that works really well, and then that'll go onto some other section and it'll be broken, or something will have, there'll be a bug on there that still needs fixing. And if we've spent the time doing that, the value isn't there in comparison to fixing that issue that we had. Yes, add it after, but at the time it's not necessarily.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Amanda, anything you want to add in terms of good practices for UI, UX, BA collaboration?
I think it's just closeness of the relationship. I obviously work very close with you. We sound off ideas. I work with an excellent BA Channel 4 called Paul Shue, and it was like having a wingman. He just knew the questions before I asked them. So as you were alluding to earlier, if I wasn't in a meeting, he would be asking questions on my behalf, because he would know I would ask him that question if he came out without it. And it's that sort of, I think I worked with him for about a year and a half, and it almost became like a partnership. And it was really a case of we knew exactly what to do. And I think when those job roles, the design and the BA, are paid properly, from the benefit of the company, a lot of it's speed as well. You already know how to work each other. You already know the questions that need to be asked. It doesn't matter what tool it is. I think we worked on 4D on demand. We worked on the normal website. So we worked on about 3 or 4 different sections of the 4D sort of offering. And every single one of them had different problems, but because we'd experienced problems previously, we were able to get past them. He would go fight his battles for me with the business. I would have different maybe battles with marketing or brand, and then we would get to it. So it's definitely collaboration, working closely, realizing that as a team, you can do the best for the user and for the business. And I think when one's missing, either the BA is not there or the designer's not there, it does get skewed slightly, and you'll notice websites. And it's funny because you were sort of saying, oh, as a BA, I can put a box here and I can do that. But I think sometimes BAs, because they're not trained or they don't have that experience in user, like UX design and stuff, there's tips and tricks you can use the same interaction patterns. It makes the cognitive load less on the user. It means if they're in one section and they're using that part of the interface, they go, we're different. HSBC, where the website was so huge and across multiple countries, and the amount of time I spent in Confluence, God, making documentation to highlight the fact that this component worked the same, but it worked the same across 25 websites. Easy, didn't matter where you were in the country. Yeah. And sometimes a BA would miss that sort of trick because they're not thinking that way. They'll be thinking of that short-term goal, or what do I need to do for that, as opposed to thinking broadly. And I think designers can sometimes come out of that tunnel and think, well, actually, I do need to do that. And if I do that, I can do it on there, and there. And again, always with the user in mind.
That's it. And it's important, as you said, it's a science, it's a profession for a good reason. UX and UI design. And BAs don't go through those that professional qualification, that study that you do. So it's quite nice actually to to separate the roles, and work together and learn from each other, I would say. But so I think I feel like we're almost out of time. Actually, sorry, one other thing, Amanda. Nice of you to recognise Channel 4 as well. I had Maya on here who leads the BA practice at Channel 4, so I'm sure she'll be pleased to hear Paul and her team has been performing well. So that's good.
Oh, yeah, it was a long time ago. I think it was about 10 years ago. I was at Channel 4. But, it was in proper IT crowd. Like literally, we were in the basement doing all the design and the development. But so yeah, it's good. It was excellent. It was a fun company.
Well, I hear they're still doing good things anyway from Maya. So good. So I think on that note, I think as we're approaching the end of time anyway, and we could go on for ages talking about UX and UI and the interaction with BAs is really essential. But I think we've probably covered most things. Hopefully you agree. But yeah, so maybe this is a good just point to say thank you both. It's been really good to see you again. It's been a little while. Excellent to have your insights, and definitely, when it comes to UX and UI, value both your experience and insight always. So appreciate you coming on the show and sharing it with other people as well. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Amanda.